Hello friends! Now here is a question that I get asked way more than one would think, and it goes something like this. Well, I've been separated from my spouse for several years. Do we really need to go to court and get an official divorce? Look, I get it. Divorce paperwork sucks. And having to go through divorce court itself, those evidentiary hearings, the time, the money, that really sucks. But if you move out and life moves on, not getting an official divorce decree from that spouse that you haven't spoken with in several years or maybe even several decades, that means that you can be sitting on a legal landmine. And unfortunately, it often doesn't blow up until the worst time possible. So in today's video, we are going to break down how that unfinished divorce can come back and bite you and cause you all kinds of problems than if you just see it through and get officially divorced from that spouse. Welcome back to the Divorce Broadcast. My name is Manny Segarra, coming to you from Miami, Florida. All right, so let's start off with the obvious one, and that is marriage number 2, what I like to call the bigamy problem. What do I mean by that? Well, by way of example, let's say someone leaves their spouse. They don't get officially divorced, and several years pass by, and they're living their best life, and they meet someone new. They start dating this person, and Cupid's arrow strikes again, meaning they want to make it official by tying the knot and getting married. Except that person who left their spouse and never officially got divorced, they're still married. So that shiny new marriage, marriage number 2, void. That's right, it never legally existed. I think we should do that whole rewind thing just to kind of make the point. I'm going to say it again. That shiny new marriage number 2, void. It never legally existed. Under Florida law, that first marriage will be recognized until it is dissolved by a court of competent jurisdiction, which means that that new spouse in our example, your new spouse, isn't really that person's new spouse. And as a matter of fact, they can be charged criminally for bigamy. There's actually jurisdictions in the country that still prosecute criminally bigamy. So unless you're going to have orange jumpsuits on the wedding registry or a horrible story to have to tell your kids, getting married a second time while you haven't officially been divorced is not a good look. Remember that in order to move on to chapter 2 of a person's life, they have to resolve chapter 1. And a lot of times that means getting divorced from that spouse they haven't spoken to in a long time. We are now encountering issue number 2, what I like to call the baby surprise. It's a little bit tricky, so try to follow. Under Florida law, if you are still legally married to your spouse, but have a child, have a baby with someone else, the law presumes that the parent is your legal spouse. I know a lot of you may be shocked, but we actually did a whole video on this issue. I invite you all to check it out. But either way, picture this. You get separated from your spouse. You never officially get divorced. You meet someone else, and you have a baby with a new partner. The problem? Florida law presumes that your actual spouse, not your partner, is the parent. That means, for example, that your estranged husband, his name could actually be on the birth certificate instead of the biological father. So messy, that doesn't even start to cover the issue that you will find yourself in. In this situation, there's going to be a paternity suit. There's going to be a DNA test, and it is going to be a hot mess. I have seen it with my own eyes, the chaos in court. Judges trying to ascertain DNA results and figure out who the biological father is, who the legal father is. Do we have to appoint a guardian ad litem to see who the child's going to spend time with? And who's going to pay child support for this child? It is a legal headache that could have easily been avoided had the divorce occurred before the baby even came along. Think of it this way. If Maury Povich is knocking at your door or showing up to your wedding, you probably waited way too late to get divorced. Now we're going to talk about issue number 3, the inheritance mess. In other words, we're going to talk about money. I know a lot of you, your ears have perked up because I mentioned we're going to talk about money. But here's a common scenario. Let's say someone separates from their spouse and maybe 10, 15 years pass by and they don't officially get divorced. But they do build a new life. They have a new family. They acquire significant assets after they separate. Then suddenly, and oftentimes unexpectedly, they pass away. Take a wild guess. Who usually comes out of the woodwork? Who usually comes creeping out of the night, back, front, and center? I know you all know where this is going. That's right, the estranged spouse, oftentimes with full spousal inheritance rights. No bueno. Meanwhile, the partner of the person who unfortunately passed away, who was with them for 10 or 15 years, they get left to fight for scraps. Because remember, spousal rights, they can trump some of the most careful estate planning. And that means that the estranged spouse, they may get a majority or if not all of the assets, while the partner who was with them through the remainder of those 10, 15 years may get left with nothing or close to nothing. Not exactly the legacy that I'm sure people want to leave their life partners. So the life lesson in this is if you want to leave something for your loved ones, it's better to leave them love letters and family photos, not lawsuits. So it's important to tie up those loose ends. And finally, let's talk about the 4th situation when it comes to how that unfinished divorce can come back and bite someone and cause them problems years later. And that is in the area of credit and financial chaos. The pitfall being debts. What do I mean by that? I mean loans, credit card payments, mortgages. If the estranged spouse continues to rack up these financial obligations, if the other spouse is still married to them, it could get very messy for them. Even if that other spouse thinks that they are financially independent, they may not be. If that estranged spouse either defaults on these payments or gets sued, depending upon how these liabilities or these financial obligations are structured, the creditors may come back and haunt that other spouse who didn't incur these debts. Remember that under Florida law, liabilities incurred during an intact marriage may be considered marital under Florida law. So imagine that person thinking they're independent and they get dragged into their estranged spouse's litigation for unpaid debts. So remember, separation or just kind of putting that other spouse out of your mind, it doesn't cut the tie. Divorce does. Divorce is the only way to get those assets and liabilities separated and apportioned to the appropriate spouse. So here's the final takeaway. Separation may seem like freedom, but until you finalize it, until you get that official divorce, you are still legally married with all strings attached. Divorce, it's not fun, but it's closure, it's protection. It's the only way that you can assure that your future is not tied to your past. So if you're sitting around watching this video or on the couch or with family, thinking to yourself, we've been separated for years, but don't worry, we'll get to that divorce officially eventually. This is your wake-up call. Wake up. Don't wait for the bigamy criminal charge or the inheritance fight or for that Maury Povich DNA test. Get it done. All right, so that is a wrap on our video as to how an unfinished divorce can come back to bite you and cause you many problems in the future. We would love to hear any comments about people who have either family members or friends who have waited way too long to get divorced and have gotten some consequences. But in the meantime, if you know anyone else that is dealing with this type of issue, have them look us up at www.segarralawfirm.com. We have offices in Miami and Orlando, Florida. Se habla español. Please do us a favor and like this video and subscribe to the Divorce Broadcast. We will see you all soon. Thank you.